Hello and welcome. Today we'll be talking with Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Lenox Shuman, who is also leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, and originally from St. Cuthbert's Mission, is a descendant of the Arawak tribe in Guyana, and has held positions such as a council member of the National Tushaus Council in Guyana. Today, Lennox will be talking to us about his instrumental role that he plays as Deputy Speaker in the National Assembly and telling us about his mandate as leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, especially as it relates to representation to the indigenous communities and the First Peoples of Guyana. Lennox, I want to welcome you to the program and thank you very, very much for the opportunity. I don't think I've been as excited about an interview in a very, very long time because I really admire your work and I believe your contribution to Guyana is valuable and it's very inspiring to see where you have come from and where you are today. And I hope that everybody in Guyana and globally Guyanese in Guyana, in the diaspora as well, really appreciate your contribution to Guyana as it is as present. Tell us, first of all, what was your main reason for getting into politics?
Well, Jennifer, let me start off this by saying thank you for having me on your show and on your program. I find it's always important to share whatever little knowledge we have. And to ensure that perspective and knowledge is transferred and transported holistically. That being said, I want to offer you a correction right off the bat. We're not the Arawak tribe, we're actually called Arawak Nation. And that has been corrected by UNICEF several times.
Oh, I'm
But that being said, um, my foray into politics, it was birthed out of necessity. At least when we looked at indigenous people's issues, when I was part of the National Tushaus Council, I was the vice chairman of the NPC. And we had looked at issues that still continue to persist 206 years later, beyond when Guyana was given to the Brits by the Dutch. We are 206 years and we have not addressed our land titling. In fact, in 2017, the APNU AFC government took back a title just by gazetting one of our communities, an area, as an NDC. That amongst a variety of things, the shortcomings in satisfying what the Constitution mandates, what I'd say the blatant racism in policy and policy formulation, the coastal drift, the lack of education, economic activity. As 10% of the population, we have to have a say in our futures. So we ventured in, at least I ventured into politics, not individually, but with a group of people who were frustrated with the system. And I want to say that just by being present, by being on the platform, we have seen already a monumental shift in how they intend on approaching indigenous peoples. And had we not done that, I think it might have just been status quo or back to status quo.
Of your being leader of your Liberty and Justice Party, what is first and foremost your agenda as being a member of Parliament and representing your people?
One of the things that was high on our agenda, and I think we may have to take a little bit of a shift in that in light of COVID, was for constitutional reform to take the fore. Because I think that once we get some components, I can't say that we have a perfect formula. I don't think that any political party has a perfect formula. But I would like to see constitutional reform being placed on the agenda and being pursued aggressively. Um, Obviously, we would have gone through the COVID and providing relief for the people in light of the environment right now. But I also want to see that the Constitution of Guyana, even in its revision, is respected. We had two political parties that sat in breach of the Constitution for over 20 years. That is the APNU AFC and the PPP. They sat in breach of the Constitution where it says that no dual citizen can sit in Parliament. But yet they simply accepted it and moved on. How do you have constitutional violators continue to occupy office? And yet nothing happened. So there must be a greater emphasis placed on constitutional compliance. And where there is no compliance, there needs to be some charges. You can't violate the Constitution and then nothing happens. Look at what happened for the last 5 months in Guyana, and Granger kept saying that, or Mr. Granger kept saying that I obey the Constitution, I obey the court rulings, but yet he did quite the opposite. So there must be some consequence for when you violate something. It can't just be, well, we'll go to the court will provide guidance, and then nothing happens. If that is the case, then who is to stop anyone from violating the Constitution and then nothing happens?
So one of the main things what we seen throughout the few months that went by, the long 5 months and so forth, from the very first time when you entered the court and so forth in your native attire, what's the main reason behind that dress that you wear in the National Assembly?
If you look at the cultural makeup of Guyana, we call this land of six races. I prefer something different, maybe a land of six nations or six peoples, right? Because just by identifying race, we have already identified one main component of our problem nationally. And there is only one group in this country that has to de-identify before they're accepted in society. Excuse me. And that group is the indigenous grouping. Basically, we have to leave our language behind and speak only English. We have to leave our culture behind. We are not permitted to practice our culture, at least not within the Georgetown settings or setting, without being looked at with some degree of scorn. We seldom ever participate at the national level in food programs that where our traditional food, even to that, we can't even have access to it on the coast. When you look at what happened, Guyana has been dominated by an Indo and Afrocentric parties, but yet the first people we've never had a say in the national affairs of this country. So when we were going through this entire process in that long and tedious and very exhausting 5 months, it was meant to highlight that Guyana is not only about Blacks and Indians, that the indigenous peoples, the first peoples of this country, need to have a say in what happens in Guyana.
So
And
basic, sorry.
by by ensuring that our people understand that you do not have to de-identify, you don't have to be ashamed or afraid to step forward and say, look, this is what we would like, and this is who I am, and this is how we intend on showing our presence and ensuring we're not left out. When I walked into court in my traditional attire, I was the only indigenous person in there. And many indigenous people said, look at this. We've got Blacks and Indians fighting for our country and we're not doing anything about it. Are we to simply sit by and watch? But they're also very afraid because of how society looks down on them. Me, let society come. I'll face it head on.
So Lennox, you're telling me this is a cry for representation.
I wouldn't say it's a cry. I'd say it's a demand. Had I not been, and I think I would like to suspect very arrogantly of me to say it, but I'd like to suspect that had I not been part of this grouping that fought for democracy, we might have seen a different political dispensation in Guyana. That the PNC would have just walked over the country. We would have had a different political formulation, maybe sat in a dictatorship. Had I not been on stage, and I will say that without apology.
I think certain things like, having things in the legislative and not implementing it, that's the key problem. If somebody is dressed as an Amerindian with their native wear, would they be able to get into a building?
No, right now they have no choice. And what I did with my traditional attire and walking into court and into parliament is to let people know, and I've even walked into office of the president like that, is that there should be no office where indigenous people should fear walking into. If someone is to wear a sari and walk into a public building, do they get turned back? No. They walk straight in. If they walk in with a dashiki, do they get turned back? No. So why is it that those two, and even with a gong and all these things, why is it that those people could walk into those structures and not get turned back, yet an indigenous person cannot walk in with their traditional attire. It is a discriminatory system. And I think what I've done in my, at least in my presentation in court and in parliament, is to show people that the system by design, it's racist and it's biased against indigenous peoples.
And even now, when you sit in parliament, you often sit alone on those benches because the opposition would have, the other members of the opposition would have walked out. How do you feel about that?
There is a bit of political gamesmanship that happens on both sides of the house. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers are paying me to go into parliament. They're paying me to represent them. They're paying me to sit there, and if I have to debate, I will debate. If I have to discuss, I will discuss. If I have to go and shake hands and ensure that, you know, the things that are meant to be done for the people are done, then that is what I will do. But I think it is irresponsible of me, as someone being paid by the taxpayers, to just walk out of parliament. I think it is very irresponsible of me. Thus, I have a responsibility to the people. I intend on ensuring that they get their money's worth in representation in parliament. It is as simple as that. I find it very difficult at times to sit with people who wanted to rig the elections. You know, you've got the governing People's Progressive Party, Civic, who won the elections. People seem to think, or tend to think in the back of their minds, that we fought for the PPP. We did not fight for the PPP. We fought for people's franchise to be respected. We fought for democracy to be maintained. And that it's as simple as that. So we did not really fight for the PPP. We fought for the people and to ensure that their franchise got respected. So yes, at times it can be a bit uncomfortable, especially with the remarks that are being thrown my way from people in the opposition.
So, Lennox, as a member of parliament, one of the reasons why the other members, you know, they walk out and, you know, they feel that because obviously the ruling party has the majority, that even if they're there, that their voice will not be heard, their input will not be, you know, represented. Is that a true reflection of the parliament right now?
I think to a certain extent, yes. But the one thing that needs to be underscored is that while they were in office, they had ample opportunity to change the system. And when the system now comes back and starts backfiring on them, then they're trying to cry foul. You cannot sit there and have an opportunity to change the system, and when you go on the other side and it's no longer working for you, then you're going to cry foul. That's precisely what they're doing. And I don't support that at all. When we have an opportunity, we're given an opportunity to implement positive change, we need to take that opportunity, because when we get on the other side, the system has to be fair. We cannot allow a lopsided system to continue. And that is why constitutional reform needs to be one of the front things on the agenda.
You're on the ground a lot, speaking to people in the communities. What are, besides those few that you highlighted, what are some of their major concerns about Guyana?
The majority of it is equity. Everyone wants a piece of the pie of Guyana, and everyone wants to ensure that they're not left out of this big formula. That is the reality on the ground. When you talk to people in these communities, they say, look, why is it that the coast is getting this? How can I get this? Right? Everyone wants to ensure that they get their fair share of what is Guyana. Guyana cannot only go to the rich and the super rich, where they take up all of these massive lands and all these things, where they get all of the juicy contracts, and then all they get are the scraps from the end of the table. Everyone wants to ensure that they get their equitable piece. And right now, I don't know if that is the direction it's going. It's too early for me to evaluate, but I will say that I don't too like the indicators so far. We're hopeful that there may be some shift. That what the government is trying to do right now is to get things on track, but we're hopeful that there is a shift where it becomes a lot more poor-centric.
What is that term that you're using? Pro-centric?
Poor-centric.
Poor-centric, what does that mean?
To elevate people out of poverty, people who are poor, who cannot afford
Oh,
the dailies and stuff like that, right? When you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, tier one and tier two have not been met in many of these communities. So when you look at wealth generation in those communities, it is not there. Most of that stuff happens on the coast.
So what indicators specifically you're talking about that you're currently dissatisfied with?
Let's take a look at the oil and gas industry, for example, one of the larger ones. You tell me of how many people that are south of the coast would have benefited from that. And you name me the families who are south of the coast who would have benefited from that. You will not find it because we all know that the larger, richer families in Guyana can afford to do the things that are necessary to get into the oil and gas industry. If you look at where rice and sugar is produced, it's produced on the coast. And that is where a lot of the money seems to be housed. So if they wanted to buy half of Guyana to the south, then they could simply earn their money on the coast and use that money to buy half of Guyana to the south. And that's the reality. So it's not very poor centric.
So Lennox, so far the government hasn't reached 100 days as yet. But from what you're telling me today, it seems as though you're not completely 100% satisfied with the progress so far. Is that what you're saying? That there is still a lot of concerns and things that are happening that you're not pleased with?
I would say it's a mixed bag at this point. I'm sitting down evaluating and watching what's happening. Um, I can't say that I have a good or a strong enough marker to say that this is the direction that they are going. What I see is a lot of things coming in. I don't know that the public is being told in very concise and direct terms where all of these things are going to be coming from and who's getting what. So it's very interesting. And like I said, I am right now sitting down watching and give it another. We remember we just came out of budget debates. We went through the estimates and then, you know, pretty much the implementation of budget and all that stuff. So I'm going to sit down and wait and give it up to Christmas and see what kind of evaluation um, can be done, and then decide from there how we're going to approach the next 4 years.
So even with these concerns that you have right now, though preliminary, as you said, you're going to wait until Christmas. How would you go about to address these concerns to see if you, because you're a member of parliament, you're part of the legislature. How will you address these concerns that you have to ensure that some effect change?
As a member of parliament, I have to sit down and talk with the administration and find out what strategic direction they're going. And I'm not trying to find out, I will be very clear. I don't want to find out your game so that I could undermine you. I want to find out your game so that I know how I could support it be, and if I don't think that it is strong enough, that I could contribute to making it strong enough. That is the way I look at Guyana. It is not politics real as, or classic politics in that sense. I'm not a politician to that extent. I'm here for the people of Guyana. I've always worked for the people of Guyana since I came back. And at the end of the day, if I see that there is a direction that the government is not going that I feel that they could do different, then I will obviously have to have that dialogue with them. But I don't jump from zero to fight right off the bat. You must permit dialogue to take place. And if that dialogue falls on deaf ears, then we obviously have to rethink our strategy going forward. But it becomes difficult now to go from where we are and say 5 years down the road that you didn't do this, you didn't do whatever, when I had ample opportunity to talk to the decision makers and say, look, these are the things that I'd like you to do. And if, help along. And if there are shortcomings, like I said, find ways to address it. I strongly believe in dialogue. I want to draw your attention to this $200 billion investment that is available to Guyana. Guyana's GDP is 4.121 billion, I think. Now, if you look at an investment of 200 billion US dollars in Guyana, it would take a tremendous amount of giving away or a tremendous return on that investment for someone to be willing to put $200 billion into Guyana. I'm not saying that Guyana does not need money to develop. We don't need foreign investors because we do. In my view, we do. But what exactly is it that we are giving for that? What exactly is it that people are buying when they come in here? There is the drive by Eastern Airlines that wants to come into Guyana and they want to become the flag carrier. But yet, imagine if I am a Guyanese and I go to the US and I tell them, look, I'm a Guyanese person, I have a Guyanese airline, and I want to be the flag carrier of the US. Should the US just give it to me like that? Do you think that they will give it to me like that? And if the answer is no, then why should we be giving anyone that literally our patrimony just like that? I think that anyone who wants a flag carrier status from Guyana should be an organic carrier that comes from Guyana, that generates wealth for Guyanese, that hires Guyanese, all of these things. Right now, we can't even fly a single plane originating from Guyana into the US. Why is that?
Mhm.
Is because the whole system is off balance. When we could attain that balance, then I think we'd be in a different position.
Mhm.
So for all of the excitement and having our hands filled, it's good to see movement, but I think movement without thought puts us in a very dangerous position. And I see, a lot of, once again, a lot of things that are happening that I'm sitting there and watching and hoping that it is just a stopgap that needs to be addressed. Take, for example, there's a lot of issues around Ogle International Airport. There seems to be quite a bit of corruption around that airport. But yet, to date, this new administration has not announced that they want to do an audit, not only on that, but in restructuring the aviation industry. The maritime sector contributes 80% to Guyana's economy. I have not seen a maritime investment framework as yet. I have not seen how they intend on restructuring that. So there are a lot of things. Once again, I'm hopeful that the rush that we see out of the gates, it is not a rush just to give away and just to ensure that people are, that the people who paid into the purse for campaigning and stuff are satisfied. Because if that is the case, then Guyana is going to be in a vastly different place 10 years from now. What we will end up with is a Guyana that is not owned by Guyanese.
Those are some very important points you raised, and I think it's a very valuable contribution, and we should really pay attention to your comments and your feedback on this. For the carrier, the national carrier you spoke of, do we have the capacity to have that and the expertise from Guyana be organically, as you said?
Absolutely. You have people who want to come and invest in Guyana. And I'm talking about Guyanese who want to come back and invest in Guyana, who want to develop this. But what we found is that there seems to be this mental fix in people that if I can't do it, then you can't do it. I'd rather get a stranger to come and do it. I think that there is scope for us to have a local carrier that works as a flag carrier that has the international reach. Whether or not the government is willing to sit down and look at that and cultivate that kind of an environment, it's a different story, right? It I would say that the majority of national carriers globally have failed because of government involvement and management issues, plus labor issues and stuff. The way to go about getting a national carrier, it has to be done through a PPP, through a private-public partnership. Once you get that done, I strongly believe that we have the capacity, and even if we don't have it right now, Guyana needs to at minimum triple its population to have a sustainable economy. So when we triple the population, you're talking close to 3 million people. We are going to have the people for it. And we have not even started to talk about the expansion in the tourism industry as yet. When you start to expand in the tourism industry, it becomes a different set, a different dynamics altogether. I want to draw your attention to what I stated earlier about foreign carriers coming into Guyana and not
Mm-hmm.
giving our locals enough room to be able to fill that gap. If one plane comes into Guyana that takes 400 people, from outside of Guyana, they come in and then they go out. That is $400,000 going out on every flight. Yes, you're going to ship cargo, you'll have cargo
Wow.
capacity, but guess what? Even when you pay to ship that cargo, the payment that you're paying to ship that cargo goes out of the country. And what we get at the bottom end is maybe a little bit of handling on the ground. We most definitely don't get the fuel cost because we have to import that, and we subsidize their landing fees. So the majority, the lion's share, or should I put it in this way, the elephant's share of the money goes out of the country. Whereby if we had a carrier in Guyana, domestically owned and operated, the majority of that money would be circulated in Guyana. And if you just do 400 and we're anticipating maybe 4 or 5 flights a day, right? You're looking at 2,000 passengers at 1,000, and take that over a year. And that is just regular paying passengers. We haven't started to talk about the air, like the front end, like the pilots, the flight attendants, the maintenance, and all those things. We haven't even brought those in yet. Because when you're paying them, their money also stays out of the country and they go out of the country and spend. They don't come into Guyana and spend and stay here and develop Guyana. So those are some of the things that we have to start a conversation around.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that in the future, with the interconnectedness, with the plans that they have to connecting the deep south with Deepwater Harbor in Berbice, and having that whole road and railway through, all the way down to Lethem, that maybe that more development will go to those regions?
Yeah, but we have to be careful about when we talk about development. Development is about resource and people. It is not about putting a road down or building a structure, right? Um, and yet, I would say, how do you give communities an opportunity to benefit equitably from the system? Let's take, you want to build a road and a rail system from Latham to Georgetown, but yet the tendering process comes from Georgetown. It is placed in the papers that are Georgetown centric. And in order to do it, the criteria and everything is so stringent. There's this long shopping list that you have to get done. So you would never find people in the south of Georgetown benefiting from those things. Maybe you get to Linden, and then the rest of it is just you can't find the people who are going to satisfy those criteria. So uh, I don't know that you're going to see the kind of financial impact in the hinterland or south of Georgetown that you would want to see, even with the road and rail and all that stuff coming in.
Have you had any meetings or any concerns expressed by communities where the railway? I mean, I'm probably it's a little premature or early for us to be talking about this, but I'm not sure what's happening on the ground. But maybe perhaps people are already expressing concerns, or just talking about the whole fact that this railway will pass through indigenous lands, and what are their concerns, because I know the conservation is there. I mean, people in those communities, they hold on to their culture, guard it very closely, and with an I'm not sure, we all need to, we want Guyana to develop, but at the same time we want to preserve our culture, and we want to have that, some sort of have that balance happen. How do you see that going forward, and what is the discussion on the ground?
Well, that is the active word that you use there, balance. Many communities are looking for balance. But I will tell you that those conversations have not started in many communities because of the ordeal that we went through for the last 5 months. And I'd say even for the last 5 years, many communities struggle to make ends meet. And right now, we are not at that level yet to start that conversation because many of those communities are sitting there and saying, look, I'm hungry. Don't tell me about road, don't tell me about railway, don't tell me about planes and airports. I want to know how I'm going to A, put food in my belly, and B, put a roof over my head. Maslow's tiers 1 and 2. And until we could satisfy those two, the communities are not going to sit there and say, well, let's talk about rail, let's talk about airplanes, let's talk about boats and all those things. What they want to know is, how am I going to benefit so that my family is not going to starve? When that is done, I want to know how I'm going to get a roof over my head. When that is done, I want to know how my child will be educated. I want to know how I'm going to get health care. Those are some of the fundamental questions that communities are asking. There are also articles in the Constitution that we need to give life to. Let's deal with the indigenous component, for example, Article 149G. No one has ever developed a policy that gives life to that article. There is also the Human Rights Commission that was never formed. And there are a variety of things in the Constitution that literally people and administrations simply watch, they just watch them drift by. Article 149(2) of the Constitution talks about living in a society that is free from discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when you go into public buildings, you're only catering for the people who have 2 hands and 2 legs. We don't have any public building that is wheelchair accessible. When some people walk into public buildings, you force them to change the way they dress. What if that is the only thing that they can afford? Are you saying that they cannot access government services? If I want to go and report a matter to the police station and I'm wearing just an armless, they say you can't come in here. Well, what if I'm a victim of a crime? Are you
Mm-hmm.
telling me that because I cannot afford a shirt, that I cannot come and report my matter? So all of these things, and those are things that literally, um, what I say, subtracts from the richness that Guyana can be or could be. We see vehicles running red lights and running stop signs, double laning in a single lane, almost running people over, and in some cases people get ran over, and nothing happens. So we have to literally find a way to not only enforce the Constitution as it is, but enforce the laws of Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hopeful that some of those things can be addressed. We wanted to look at educational reform. We wanted to look at legislative reform. Quite a lot of reform. Um, it's a very broad agenda. So we're not looking at getting all this accomplished in a month or two. This is a 5-year term,
Right.
and we sit with our partners in the joiner to see how we could achieve that.
Do you think now, under this new government, the indigenous nations, let me say that correctly this time, the indigenous nations will make further advancements in the next 5 years, especially now since you're in parliament?
Well, I think that just by my presence on stage would have already triggered a difference in how they approach indigenous peoples. And I'm hopeful that there are a series of conversations that can be undertaken with the various ministers and the administration to see how we could change the system so that indigenous communities benefit equitably from the system, right? Let's take two regions, for example, regions 7 and 8. They're the largest gold producing regions in Guyana that also are heavily populated with indigenous peoples. But yet you don't have proper roads, you don't have proper schools, health centers, airports in those two regions, yet they kept the economy afloat for how many decades? And you take all of the gold out from those regions just to build the coast. That is not equitable development. So I'm hopeful that when we have a chance, I mean, we just came out of budget debates and all that stuff. So now we have an opportunity to sit down and have this kind of dialogue with the government or the administration to see how we could address the issues in those communities and around the indigenous peoples. Um, that being said, people tend to think that in order to make a difference, you have to win elections. There are a variety of ways that you could win something without having to run. For us, winning is not about winning elections. Winning is about making a difference for the people on the ground. And if we could do that just by dialogue, then it changes the electoral framework. We don't have to go and contest elections and fight teeth and nail every single time just to divide the nation, when we could literally form dialogues, strategic dialogues with our partners in the government to say, look, we can do this together, and I can help you where you don't have the expertise, and we're not doing it for credit. We're doing it for the people.
The government has launched a COI for into the Guyana Elections Commission. One of the things well, they will bring out their report based on their investigation. But do you think that private sector and civil society should play a greater role going forward, like for recommendations as to reform for GCOM?
I think the reform for GCOM needs to be holistic. Of course, private sector should play a part because they're the biggest contributor to the economy. But I want to see through this process that when everything is concluded, that the entirety of the Guyana Elections Commission is depoliticized. I don't think that any political party should have an operative that sits there. There should be very clearly laid out standard operating procedures, policies, all of those things that should be clearly laid out. I mean, there are vagaries in the laws that we saw come out during the recon process that need to be addressed. I think that, let's take one for example. If I am a counting agent, or whether I'm a counting agent or not, if I'm a political leader, I should not have to have a counting agent that goes there to submit a request for a recount. It should be automatically triggered that the minute a party leader or a party representative places in the hands of GCOM a request for recount, it should not be at the behest or at the discretion of the Guyana Elections Commission. It should be a mandatory or an automatic trigger for a recount. You know, some of those things need to be dealt with. But I want to see at the end of all of this process that the Guyana Elections Commission is completely depoliticized.
Do you think that there will be a time in the future where there will be voting not based on ethnic voting, ethnicity?
I'm hopeful that we can do that. I think the way we could get around that is through constitutional reform. Surely the PR and constituency representative system, it serves its purpose. And once again, we don't have the perfect formula, but I think that we could go to a more constituent-based representation system or representative system with the right for those districts to recall their member of parliament. And I think once we do that, then you'll find that the parliamentarians are more responsive to the people. I also strongly believe that the government, when I say government, I'm talking because parliament is one component of government, right? There are the three tiers. You've got the legislative, administrative, and the judiciary. So the legislative branch of government needs to sit down there and say, look, what we have to do is to give every single parliamentarian a subvention to have an office in the district that they represent. So now when you do that, then you're a lot more responsive to the people. And the people also, you understand that you have a responsibility to the people. And by that interaction every day, the people come and say, look, Mr. Shuman, this is important to our community and we'd like to have it addressed. Rather than sit here and wait and have to go through some massive party machinery just to get something small done. Take, for example, the amount of people that would have reached out to me asking if I could help them to get a scholarship, asking if I could help them to get a house lot, asking if I could help them with a variety of things. That is because the system has not been built and we still have this mental fix that when you talk to someone in authority, that something gets done. What we need to do is to start building the system so that there is always a constant point of contact and interaction that is addressed through the system, a very systemic approach, and that is absent in Guyana.
I just wanted one more clip from you. If you can share your childhood memories of growing up in St. Cuthbert's Mission, and then I know you would have spent some time abroad as well, but your story will be, you know, different from what I've heard because, you know, growing up, I've been to St. Cuthbert's Mission many times, all the way in the back, and I shot the arrow, and I even eat I think it was wild hog. I had lava, I drank black water. And I love the hinterland of Guyana. It's the most beautiful place, I think, anywhere. And I just love it. So it's really an honor to talk to you. And I'm just going on about Guyana. I want you to tell me about your story.
Well, I'll say that I had a very unconventional childhood. When we were growing up, we didn't have vehicles come into our community regularly. So whenever vehicles would come in, we'd be all excited and we'd want to go and watch and hang on and, chase it because we were so excited at seeing something move so fast. We're talking like 1970s here, right? I grew up under Burnham, and it was a really difficult time. And I tell people this because it is a fact. I ate lead from lead pencils. I ate wood skin. I ate sand, mud, candle wax, eggshell, peanut shell. Because under the Burnham era, or Burnham's time, I'd say reign because that's what it was a very difficult life. My dad left the military because of racism. In fact, some of his batchmates threatened to kill him if they were promoted. So he and his batch just left. First indigenous servicemen in the military. My mom couldn't move up because she is mixed Indian and white. So she left the country and went to Canada on a visitor's visa, and then she applied for refugee status, where she got her citizenship in 1989 and sponsored us in 1990. And then I went to school in Canada. I finished high school there. I went to college. I worked in Canada. I lived in Canada for a while, and then I'm back here. Some of the childhood memories that I have are, well, I'd say there's a certain romanticism that you have when your childhood would have been difficult. Going fishing, no doubt, was part of our life cycle. Sometimes we'd catch, sometimes we wouldn't. Going hunting, even though we were kids, we'd still want to go and hunt. We were not very good hunters, but at least we learned a lot. I'd say the amorous side of growing up in that environment is about learning to survive. We are survivors, and we've lived and survived in Guyana for well over 13,000 years. So it would not have been something overly difficult to survive for us. It's part of our gene. The living component was difficult. I came to school and I got a scholarship at North Georgetown Secondary School. And when I was there, it's every single day you show up in the morning, buck, bucky, buckeye, buckio, in very derogatory terms. And it wasn't pleasant for an indigenous person to come to the coast and have to go to school and be subjected to racism every single day. So literally I left the comforts of my home where everyone were of the same and we all accepted and lived happily. And you leave that environment and you go straight into an environment where racism was just so prevalent. I lived with a guardian who would beat me just because I was just because I was Amerindian. So it was a difficult life as a child, but at least it's taught me enough about what I don't want to see the rest of Guyanese suffer. And I think that contributes a lot more to my drive and what it is that I want to do in Guyana.
I really thank you for sharing that. This just brought a tear to my eye. Really thank you for sharing that with me. It's really something, and you can't even get over what he said. I'm sorry. It's really something to know that this is the struggles and your life. When I asked you initially, I really didn't expect this story, and I'm really glad you shared it with me, because this is a representation of the indigenous people in general and some of the struggles that your people would have faced over the years and still continue to face today. And I can see why that you're here today and representing the people in the assembly and doing what you're doing is really commendable. And I really truly hope that your advances and whatever decisions that you make and the whole agenda of the Liberty and Justice Party is realized, and more changes are effected in the National Assembly and in Guyana as a whole because of you.
Well,
So
thank
I
you.
really,
I certainly hope so too. I hope that we can make a difference, and that we could implement some changes for not only the indigenous peoples, for the people who continue to live through poverty. I remember we were sharing out masks in Luzignan, and you see the abject poverty of people there, and they've lived in those areas for quite some time also. So it is not only about indigenous peoples. That is the environment that I grew up. So I know the struggles of those communities. But parallel also, you still have a lot of people on the coast who are struggling. Take, for example, the squatters at Success that were just flooded out. Why do we have squatting in Guyana, in a country where we can afford to give every single person a plot of land to build a house? It should be unnecessary. In fact, it should be against the law that anyone is permitted to be without a place to call home. We have enough land. We have a small amount of people. There's no reason why people should be in that position.
I heard everything you've said, and I really value your contribution and coming on the program to share some of those thoughts with us today. And I hope that in your mission in the next 5 years that you are successful in your mandate and bringing about change to Guyana that is so much needed.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on your program.